Welcome to the Cave Creek Town Council meeting. This is June 2nd, 2025. And can you believe it rained in June in Arizona? I keep telling people it never rains in May and June in Arizona. No. Okay.
We exceeded the all-time record by an order of magnitude in rain by getting 2/10 of an inch of rain gave us an order of magnitude accession of the all-time record.
It had been 200 on June 1st.
And we-
1914.
We beat it by 10 times,
Wow.
10 times nothing.
We've got a silent roll call. We're due for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a Boy Scout in the audience. My eyes are always drawn to the Boy Scouts. So Caleb's going to lead us in the pledge.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Caleb. You did excellent. That's the best one we've ever had at town council. So congratulations. There might be a little bit of exaggeration, but
No, not really.
public announcements. I guess we already talked about the rain. Does anyone else have any announcements they'd like to make from council?
Yeah, I'd like to recognize, we've got a member of our council who recently completed a rim to rim to rim on the Grand Canyon at any age. That is an accomplishment, Joe. Congratulations on that. That's
Oh,
a
well
huge
done.
hike.
Call to the public.
Janet Moore. Mayor, Council Member Janet Moore, resident of Cave Creek. I would like to make a request of the council. I have seen on two occasions petitions submitted for your whatever to vote. They were handed in before the public could see them. And both of those petitions for two different subjects were erroneous, not valid petitions. One of them was not valid because they had people that were not voters that signed it. They had people from Connecticut. I think that the person taking the signatures really sat in local Johnny's and got signatures. I mean, the people, there was just, they weren't valid. They had people in the county that signed a couple times. And most recently was the petition that was done for dark skies. On that petition, there was no circulator. I requested a FOIA and I asked for both sides and I didn't get anything in the backside. So obviously there wasn't one. So there was no circulator. There was no real entity of who was requesting it. So it was misleading to the public for what they were requesting because I mean, the whole thing on here, and I'm not just picking on your petition, but I think it's important because if you're making votes on items and somebody's sitting up there saying, I have 145 signatures, and those signatures are really invalid because the description wasn't written correctly, because the entity that was asking for the change is not even an entity, it's just not fair. And we have some important things coming up, like, I don't know, how much is $18 million for the state land department? I think we need to make sure that our petitions are good petitions when they're turned in. So I'm going to request that anyone turning in a petition moving forward needs to have it done ahead of time to put it on with the agenda, with the items, and in your packets. So all of you would have chance to look at it ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
No additional speakers.
Okay, we're at the town manager report.
Mayor and council, I have no report tonight.
Okay. On the consent agenda, we have two items: approval of the April 14th, 2025 special town council work session minutes and approval of April 15th, 2025 special town council work session minutes. Does anybody?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is the first agenda item is council discussion, possible approval of a transfer of development rights, TDR agreement.
Mayor, there was council. About 8 years ago, you adopted into your code a provision that allows for the transfer of development rights, what we call TDR agreements. At that time, you authorized one program that implemented the opportunities under that ordinance. The theory behind the ordinance is that you are able. Sorry. I still like this, I get coughed up. You are able to preserve open space at no cost. And so what a developer has to do is come to you and identify space that can be preserved with a conservation easement. And you agree to, in effect, to accept that conservation and give open space designation and allocability for the space. And I apologize, I went down my throat right when we started talking. I'm gonna let Stephen brief you on where the properties are, and then I'll brief you on what the documents are, so I can try to talk.
Stephen?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, good evening. I've been seeing you a lot lately. This is awesome. All right, so what I'll be presenting is the hillside properties that are still available within town that would qualify for transfer development rights and the location of the receiving property and sending property.
Give me mouth to mouth. Thank you, sir.
So the first slide is a slide of the available hillside properties within Cave Creek. Hashed in green is, and I'll go to the next slide where it goes more in depth of the sending property. This is just an overall area of an idea as far as how much hillside property we have left that would qualify for transfer development rights.
And those are the parcels in red, correct?
Correct. The parcels in red are the ones that are available. The green have already been taken.
Could you identify the parcel that will be the receiving property in the parcel tonight?
Yes, Bill. That'll be this parcel here. That is the proposed parcel to be the sending hillside property. In this slide, I have an overall aerial image of the location. And then the next slides will demonstrate the amount that they will be dedicating, which would be 52,000 square feet of open space.
Now, if you look at the areas in green, those will be areas that will be subject to a conservation easement that's perpetual and they cannot be developed. That is the open space that you are guaranteeing and using the portfolio of the parcels that were identified in red on that first slide.
So the properties that are requesting for this will be off of 50th Street and 51st Street. And the additional property, 49th Street. With that, Bill?
Can you go back now? Can you
Mhm.
show on the where the property to be developed, where is that located? Can you show that on a map?
Both properties will be developed, or the proposed developments.
So what I mean,
Hmm.
are they on that larger map? So the council can see how they relate to the,
They are not, no.
okay.
Mhm. Yeah. This is just the location that'll,
Okay.
yeah.
So what we have tonight is two forms that are patterned after the original form that occurred, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. That resulted in the creation of a conservation easement and then the assignment of development rights to those parcels. That doesn't mean you're giving up approval. Those parcels will have to be developed in accordance with your code, site plan, landscaping requirements. So you're not just signing a blank check, but what you are getting is a conservation easement that preserves an equivalent amount of space on the hilltop or the hillside properties to allow for some comparable space developed on the down in the commercial district. And then once developed, then to allow the development, they have to sign the conservation easement. And the way this is written is one or two of the two parcels have not been fully rezoned commercial. So this is a contingent transfer development agreement. They're saying, we will approve and you will sign this TDR agreement, which gets that 18 and roughly 34,000 square feet preserved as conservation easement. But that is not effective until the zoning is accomplished. Once the zoning is accomplished, then the conservation easement gets recorded and you have the conservation easements then in perpetuity. The developer then she or he can develop her property, but they must do so in accordance with all the other elements of the town code. Now, are there any questions on that before I go through it? We had a typo in the agenda that I need to explain, but are there any questions on what it is you're approving?
Could you give me the location of
Yeah.
the hillside area?
Could
that
you, yeah, we did have that on the first slide.
I know, I just need to see it again.
This image, Vice Mayor, or is there another one that?
Go to that
No,
first
no,
one that had the
that-
green.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is that?
It is behind, I had this up. I apologize, Vice Mayor. It's towards Linda Drive, behind Linda Drive going down, I believe there's townhomes in that area. Which subdivision I forgot there, Vice Mayor. But it's
What are the two main crossroads?
Linda Drive and no,
Military Road?
Military.
Merit
Okay.
Military, I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is this on Black Mountain and it's facing west?
What?
Yeah,
That,
facing-
no, it's
North.
what's that?
Facing north.
Yes, I've been out there a couple times, doing inspections for another property and having looked at this property here. It is a view shed as you drive down, south of Cave Creek Road. More towards, trying to get the, appropriate locations. I apologize, Mayor.
Yes.
Up the hill from the Cave Creek Museum.
Yes, Councilmember Rhodes, yes, that's correct.
So if you decide to approve this, the public and you were giving a package that included two completely different TDR agreements, one for the 50th Street property and one for the 49th Street property, two different agreements. The resolution was drafted just for 50th Street. So I'm telling you that orally, I think you have the power, and I'm going to ask the mayor to amend the resolution, just say to authorize TDR agreements for two parcels, one at 50th Street and one at 49th Street, and that would be the motion.
Okay, but I have one last question regarding this hillside property. Who currently owns it?
The developer currently owns it at this moment,
Oh, the
SC
developer
Fulton,
currently
correct.
owns it.
Mhm.
So in reality, he could develop this parcel?
That is correct. They could develop the parcel and what they're going to be dedicating is 52,000 square feet of open space on that individual parcel. And if they come with additional development and wish to continue more through the transfer of development right process, they'd be able to do so since they have, I believe, a remaining of 62,970 square feet additional that they could also dedicate if they do additional developments within the town where they would like to request to have to disturb the entire lot in trade of preserving more of this property.
And how did you arrive at the size of the property that they were to preserve? Is that the extra developed property from the Carefree Highway development?
So how the number came about, Mayor, was it was a calculation based off of how much undisturbed that they're required for their entire project. So essentially what they are dedicating is the amount of undisturbed that they would have to preserve or have to abide by on the lot if they were not able to purchase a hillside lot and go through the transfer development rights, or if this were to not pass and they would have to adhere to the undisturbed requirements.
Do I see a representative of the developer here?
I believe so.
Mayor, members, of council, good evening. Stephen Anderson, Gammon Burnham. We represent SC Fullerton, which is the owner of all of the properties involved here and the potential developer of the property along Carefree Highway. I can start again if you'd like.
We're good.
Okay. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So basically, they're gonna use the whole property and the part, the 18,000 square feet that would be required as undisturbed. This is the offset for it, correct?
That's correct. The
Okay.
properties along Carefree Highway, which are covered by your Carefree Highway area specific plan, do put a limit on the ability to grade the site for development. And so the TDR ordinance allows us to essentially develop the entire sites along Carefree Highway.
Right, and you
Um,
offset it with the
And the offset
18,000.
is,
Okay.
yes, the 52,000 square feet on Linda.
Any more questions for him?
I guess one last question. In terms of economics, what's more valuable?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, the land along Carefree Highway is certainly more valuable for our purposes. SC Fullerton is a commercial developer, and we would like to see those properties develop, with retail uses, which is what the specific plan envisions. We did have to, as you discussed amongst yourselves a few moments ago, we did have to buy this property, the hillside property, in order to gain control of it so that we could offer it to you. So our investment does exceed not just the property on Carefree Highway, which obviously has its own value, but then to acquire this property so that we can offer it to the town has an additional added cost to the project. But I will tell you that we did find the TDR program to be attractive enough to take title to all three properties, the two on Carefree Highway and this property as well.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephen, anything else?
I
Any
have
other
nothing,
questions from council?
nothing left to add, Mayor.
Okay, let's have public comment on this.
I have no one wishing to speak.
Okay, I'm gonna make the motion because I've been coached by the town attorney. Special. Hope we don't mess this up now. Okay, move to approve resolution R 2025-12 authorizing transfer of development rights for property located on Carefree Highway and 50th Street and 49th Street.
Second.
Okay, I'm in favor of it. So second.
Second. I'm also in favor of it, and I think we owe you a debt of gratitude for buying that property and doing business in our town. Thank
Oh,
you.
Wish I'd have thought to say something like that.
We're a team.
Other comments?
I would say, I think we're fortunate in Cave Creek to have the property where we can do this. We've got beautiful properties that are difficult to develop. It gives more flexibility for the development along Carefree Highway. It's a win for the developer, win for the town, and it's a great thing that we have going. Thank you, Steve, and to the whole staff.
And it's good to see progress with the Carefree Highway specific area plan and those developments moving forward.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're on to number 2, which is council discussion of the second reading and possible approval of ordinance number 2025-07, amending ordinance number 2017-02 to revise restrictions on the half-cent transaction privilege tax to spur cross costs, trails, and open space and general fund purposes. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So this is the second reading. So same as the first reading at the last meeting with the half-cent tax that was initially started for Spur Cross. It has gone through multiple iterations of changes over the years. At one point being dedicated for open space, and then that was changed. And having the portion that was originally dedicated to open space, then dedicated to water infrastructure. This essentially takes and dedicates, in accordance with the IGA with Maricopa County, the costs related to Spur Cross for maintenance, and then 300,000 to go to trails and open space, and then the remainder would be unrestricted, so it would go into the general fund. If there are any questions, I can help with that.
Questions?
Thank you. Does it require our IGA with Maricopa County that specific ordinance be in place for the TPT tax for Spur Cross maintenance as opposed to it being just a budget line item?
The way that the IGA is written, it does specifically say that it is from the tax that was dedicated to Spur Cross.
I have a few comments. This is obviously an important ordinance and had multiple iterations, as you've said. And I know that there was some controversy at our last meeting, and maybe it was because it was after a 3-hour meeting already. But I think it's important for us to get on the record how this has all transpired. I know it might take a little time, but I think it's really important for this council and all of our residents to understand what we're doing here, because we're changing an ordinance once again that at one point in time was allocating money towards open space, and this will no longer do that. So I've done some homework, and I just want it to be known how it all happened. On February 16th, 1999, the town council approved ordinance number 99-03, which increased the existing transaction privilege tax TPT rate from 2% to 2.5% and dedicated that half-cent tax as follows: 1, debt service for the purchase of Spur Cross; 2, operation and/or maintenance of Spur Cross; and 3, protection and restoration of historical and archaeological sites on Spur Cross. On April 2nd, 2007, the town council approved ordinance number 2007-06, which added provisions that the half-cent tax would be used for the repayment of debt for both the sewer and water systems. On April 7th, 2014, the town council approved ordinance 2014-01, which added a provision that 50% of the excess funds would be used for the acquisition of open space within town boundaries and 50% allocated to the general fund. On May 1st, 2017, the town council approved ordinance number 27-02, in which the allocation of excess funds were replaced once again with 1, $100,000 used for trails; 2, 50% of the remainder allocated to the Water Infrastructure Capital Fund; and 3, 50% of the remainder allocated to the general fund. So that's where we are right now. My questions, and you kind of already said it, what the proposed 2025 ordinance revisions stipulate: $300,000 annually for trails and open space, while the remainder will go to the general fund to help fund subsidies for wastewater and Cave Creek water subsidies until they are no longer needed. 2, has there been any, and this is a question for you, Sherry, has there been any new money invested in the fund since the changes were made in 2017?
For the open space fund,
Yes.
there has not been anything. So after the change was made in 2017 to end the dedication to open space, the balance that was left at that point in time has remained in the open space fund, and it has earned investment earnings, interest earnings on that account. But other than that, there have been no other revenues going towards the open space fund.
How much are we currently paying Maricopa County for maintenance of Spur Cross?
$216,000.
And is that number expected to increase over time?
They have indicated that they will be increasing the amount in fiscal year 27. They will continue with it in 26, but they have not changed that amount in several years. So it will be updated.
So after we pay the maintenance, what's the current balance of the fund for FY25?
Of the
Open space.
open space fund?
Yes.
So the maintenance is not in the open space fund, it's in the Spur Cross fund, but the balance, the estimated balance of the open space fund that in the tentative budget, we estimated a little over 1.5 million to be in there by the end of the year with the interest earnings that would be accumulated.
And how will the town keep track of that 1.5 million?
So in the general ledger, we will be treating it as a sub-fund of the capital improvements fund. When you look at the tentative budget, you will see that it's been consolidated there. That was one of the things that we had talked about of the changes that we made. So it'll all roll forward for presentation purposes as part of the capital improvements fund, but we will track it so that we can appropriately allocate investment earnings towards that.
And appropriately allocate is what I'm concerned about. So we will use that 1.5 million in the future for purchase of open space.
Yes, that is based off of an ordinance of council And there has been no retroactive change of that amount. So yes, it must go to open space.
And so for the record, we're utilizing, we're saving the money at this point in time. We're formalizing it, but it will be in the budget for use when we need it, correct?
Correct.
And then finally, is there any money budgeted in the FY 26 budget for acquisition of open space?
Yes, so the 1.5, approximately 1.5 million that we have of the open space money is set up as a placeholder just in case we have an opportunity to spend it during fiscal year 26. And then we had also added the 18 million for the state land as just a placeholder, kind of a cap of what we're looking at as how much would be spent.
So, and then finally, that 1.5 million was generated between 2014 and 2017 when the ordinance required us to save some of that portion of the excess sales tax dollars for open space, correct?
So that's the accumulated balance. I believe there was some portion of that used years ago.
Oh, yes, a couple of years ago, we spent $350,000 and we were partnered for 33 acres and we partnered with Maricopa County who matched that amount. Okay, so the conclusion to all of this and the reason that I think it's very important to have this on the record is that all of the excess sales tax funds that were collected between 2014 and 2017 for the purpose of acquiring open space will be utilized for that purpose in the future. The town is tracking those funds separately in order to document the remaining balance and use it appropriately in the future. Whether or not the current staff or anyone on this council occupies our seats.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, are we in questions still? Other questions? Okay, seeing none, there's public comment.
I have no one wishing to speak.
No one wishes to speak. Okay, we are ready for a motion then.
I'll make the motion. Move to approve ordinance number 2025-07, amending ordinance number 2017-02 to revise restrictions on the half-cent transaction privilege tax to spur cross costs, trails, and open space and general fund purposes.
Second.
Catherine, you had the motion.
Well, I think that the reason that we're doing this is to be financially responsible. I don't think it's appropriate government accounting to have small little budgets everywhere in the budget. Is that true, Sherry?
It's not a good practice.
So we're streamlining our budget practices. We're making it more professional. We're saving the money that was accumulated for open space for that purpose. We're not taking that away. We're not spending it on other projects or programs. So I feel very confident that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the summary that you did, Vice Mayor. Yeah, this is a commitment to good accounting and also a commitment to our community that we do value and intend to do what we can for open space for the town of Cape Creek.
Questions in this end? Or comments, excuse me, we're comment time.
Other comment, yes, thank you, Mayor. For reasons I stated at the first reading of the ordinance, it's still my preference that we would not do a revision of this ordinance, but would instead use our budgeting purposes to further define what goes into each of those categories and make a more substantial commitment to the open space acquisition fund on an annual basis in our budgeting process, more to the tune of $500,000 per budget cycle. Had we been doing that in the past fiscal years and in the next 2 fiscal years that may come up before there's consideration of voters for additional funding for open space, we'd be a little further in the process. So while I think this ordinance is an improvement over what we had, it's still the 5th rendition of an ordinance trying to parcel out portions of the TPT tax, which I think should be looked at globally during each budget cycle.
Tom, anything? Nothing. Down here? Okay, I have some comments on this one. I just, I'm a big believer in putting all the money in there and getting rid of these special funds. I noticed we've had 4 past council resolutions on this that start out with spur cross alone, then morph into open space and water and general fund and all the rest. The bureaucratic overhead that is not needed, frankly, for this, I don't think we'd have done anything different if none of these meetings had happened. We just put the money in there and spend it like and budgeting like everything else. I'm going to support this, but I think that I think we're going to get done what we need to get done to protect the town, to preserve open space. It's worth preserving. We've done that. We have a solid record on doing that, whether it's Spur Cross or the 4,000 acres or leaving water in Cave Creek that we could really use in the next 2 years. So I'm going to support this, but I think we need to keep the bureaucracy down and simplify the job we have so we're not wasting a lot of time in meetings like this, like I'm wasting right now, 25, 30 people here. But I'm going to support this, and hopefully this is the last one that'll ever come up like this. So.
I do agree with Cynthia that we should be putting about $500,000 a year away in the regular budget for open space. Particularly in light of, we're going to be putting an $18 million bill to the voters here in a couple of years. And I think we ought to have somewhere as close as we can to at least a quarter of it showing good faith effort on the town.
I think that is a very nice thing to do. So, Sherry, how much have we spent on our new fire department?
So the station cost for Station 1 was about 5 million.
And how about Station 2?
We are not paying for any of the construction of that. Daisy Mountain is paying for all of that. So,
But we're responsible for part of the employee base.
yes. So the combination of the operating costs for Station 1 and the regional Station 144 is, if I remember off the top of my head, around 4.8 million.
Okay, so almost $10 million for the 2 fire stations.
The station was a one-time cost, the construction, but the operating cost is ongoing. 780,000 of it, somewhere around there, is one-time setup cost of the new station.
780,000,
Yeah.
okay. And I guess my point is, we just have extraordinary expenses. As you well know, the cost of water is going to cost us millions if we have to buy it. So while I would absolutely agree with allocating more money for open space, we have immediate and necessary expenses that we have to cover that preclude $500,000 for open space from my perspective.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and comments, so we're now ready for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oops. Let's try it
No.
again. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Algerton,
No.
Councilmember Driscoll,
No.
Councilmember Friedman,
No.
Councilmember McGuire,
No.
Councilmember Rhodes,
No.
Vice Mayor Royer,
Yes.
Mayor Morris.
I'm gonna vote yes too, so I guess.
I'm changing my vote to yes. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have
I'm not gonna do that. Yes.
3 yeses and 4 nos, so
Right.
motion fails. So just one question, where are we then with this issue?
I need to know what the direction is, because the very next council meeting, we are supposed to be adopting our final budget, and I need to know what I'm doing.
What questions do you need answered?
Well, does it
So-
revert back to the 2014 or 2017 ordinance?
Is that what people want? Is you're wanting it to go to water because it's not going to go to open space? Or are you wanting something else different than what has been proposed here?
I think we want to see something definitely going to open space. I mean, there are 4 of us who clearly said that multiple times.
So we've got the 300,000 that could go to trails
Yeah, trails.
and or
Trails
open
is not
space.
open space.
So,
Open space is open space.
so is it dropping the trails portion?
No,
And
we're still
just-
gonna have to maintain the trails, whatever the.
No,
trails say,
yes, but that just wouldn't be part of the dedication. It's already built into the budget. We talked about this the previous meeting, that is in the baseline budget already.
I
So-
think at a minimum, when it comes to putting it before the voters, we ought to have a quarter of the 18 million or whatever that number is that we ought to be providing. The optics, if you look any other way at it, is going to look like we're just trying to gouge people for more money. At least in this particular case, we're saying the town council is making painful cuts because we don't have that kind of money, just as you said. But if we don't do this, why should the town go ahead and put a property assessment on their houses if we're not willing to make some sacrifice too?
Isn't $1.56 million going to go towards it? The 18 million?
Yeah, and we're asking for another 1.5 million to be put aside there. So that gives you 25%.
Well, why not just do that as part of the budgeting process? I don't understand why it has to be, why we have to have these special funds. Why not just do this? But if you want to put $500,000, why didn't you bring that up in the budgeting?
We did.
It's not in there.
No, I know it's not.
There was no vote. There was no.
No, there was no vote or anything else. We did not put $500,000 in. I believe Cynthia asked that it be put in there when we had our little budget workshop over at by the YMCA's. It never got in there. I agree with her. We need to put money aside.
Well,
do this.
we're in a parliamentary process, and when you want to do something like that, you make a motion.
Okay.
There was no motion in the budget process to change it. We're what, one meeting away from final?
That's needed one note. I don't
It's
know.
it's
that-
kind of late in the process to be, we
well,
can't
no,
over.
the issue's been talked about for months. I don't think we're in order having this discussion after a vote on something that's not posted, but I would agree
Well,
with
we
you.
we are in order because I hope to, someone will offer a motion that we can provide guidance to staff on how to budget this.
I move that we put $500,000 into the budget every year between now and 2018, when this goes before the voters. Set aside specifically for open space acquisition.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a
I
second?
mean, sorry, 2028, when this, or 2027, when this goes before the voters.
Mayor and council, just for clarity, would you rather just have this amended to take out the trails? The trails are currently budgeted as a separate earmark in the budget. It's appropriated. Is it $230,000? So there's
Change this,
230.
Then change, okay, if you want to do it that way, I move that we make it $500,000 and take the trails out. This is $500,000 a year we're putting for open space. And then the other can be split however you want to split it
Is that,
into the general fund.
Well, we're in a parliamentary procedure. We got a motion and
Right.
you've amended your motion.
I've amended my motion.
Okay, is there a second on the amended motion?
Point of clarification, are we amending the ordinance? Is that what we're doing now? Amending the ordinance?
that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, procedurally, you've already voted.
Yeah.
but
So
we
I
can-
think somebody
no,
needs to call to
Reconsider some of the votes.
reconsider.
I make a motion to reconsider, and as part of that motion to reconsider, I would move that we allocate $500,000 to open space. Trails is budgeted elsewhere. And the remainder of the funds goes into whatever it was you want, the general fund
Right.
or whatever.
Okay. That's very
Well,
clear to us.
So the minutes, he was on the prevailing side, so he's asked to reconsider, which he has the
I've asked
power
to
to do.
reconsider, which I
Okay.
can do since.
And I do
voted.
think we need to keep it within the context of this ordinance. We do have an issue. We already been down this path on this very ordinance with this council in the last month. And we brought this back and it had to come back as a first read because you changed it so much from the prior. You're changing it tonight. And so now the question is, how do we avoid having to come back for another first read, which doesn't allow her to do the budget? Here's my recommendation. There's two ways. You can't avoid the open meeting law by declaring an emergency unless it's really an emergency, and this ain't an emergency. But what you can do under your code for the first and second read, if you have the immediate need, and so I'm going to argue this isn't an emergency. It's section 30.56. Normally, because we have changed this so substantially, just like we did at the last meeting, we made you bring this back as a first read. Tonight, I'm gonna say, we don't have to do that. We believe, because we believe, for ordinance which require immediate passage, not emergency, immediate passage may dispense with the rule of the second read. So you're going to vote to consider this as to dispense with the requirement for the second read and approve this at the first read. So that there's gonna be two components to your motion. What I'm hearing is reconsider to delete trails component and increase the 300 to 500.
And
That-
leave the rest alone.
Yes, sir. And you're allowed to do that, so that'll be reconsidered. The second will be, we're doing this and waiving the requirement for a second read because we need immediate action so she can do her budget.
So moved.
Those will be two resolutions.
Second,
No, it's one resolution because it's whatever you said.
Okay, let me think.
It's the first,
Okay.
I amend my motion to read that this accomplishes both first and second reading.
Okay. I'm okay with that as long as everybody is willing that they would agree to both, you follow me? The reason, that sometimes I say you have to, in case someone doesn't want to do that, but I think I'm hearing everybody wants to count.
So the motion is on the floor.
Okay,
and I
Now,
seconded
and
it.
it's been seconded. Now we can have discussion.
Yeah, well, you had the motion, so.
I just think we need to have about a quarter of the funds out of that $18 million in the budget so that when it goes to the taxpayers, we can legitimately say we don't have any spare money. This is what we're now given blood. And I think that's an appropriate thing. Open space is important because as we discussed earlier, if we don't have water going into the ground in this particular open space, we're gonna have to buy more water for Desert Hills. So this isn't a choice. We're gonna have to do this one way or the other, but we need to put some skin in the game.
Catherine?
While we had skin in the game, I agree that this is a good compromise. And so it's a creative solution, Grady, and I appreciate your thinking of it.
Other comments?
I would support this as a compromise position as well. My objection to the ordinance as written wasn't meant to disturb the whole process, and I apologize for the extra work that causes. But I think it gets the point across that the council was concerned about the optics of where's our support for open space and how do we present that to the community? And this provides us with the opportunity to do so. So as long as this satisfies our consideration of the support of Spur Cross operation and maintenance, then I think we could move forward with it as a functional basis. I still think it, in the long run, not an ordinance we need. It should go back to the budget process, but I can support this.
Other comments? Well, I'm gonna vote no. I think this is governmental malfeasance. It's just makes no sense at all to vote something that is just based on optics. I think we ought to vote for efficient government and doing the right thing. And we've got a solid plan to get the land out there, which I want to mention was on my watch as mayor. We've done all the things with the open space we need to do in this town. I don't think we've done anything different than what I've seen with this micromanagement. So you can count on me for a no vote. Other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you listen to the iteration of how many versions there has been of this, if it had been left alone in the beginning for the intent that was told to the people in this community, we wouldn't have all of this division of resources depending on the issue of the day. Infrastructure in this town is probably one of the greatest challenges of prioritization and funding. But we have spent so much on sewer and water, over $250 million for 5,000 people, that it seems karmically just to get the focus back on where it needs to be. The $18 million is a placeholder only, just like you've used that term. There's no $18 million, as everybody up here knows, that the town plans to pay for that land. If the voters want the land, they're going to have to tax themselves. And I gave the anecdote at the last meeting about my wife, who probably no longer is of hiking age, who didn't think she would support it. And I'm not sure how many other people feel that way. But it's appropriate to try to commit to some amount of money in the upcoming budget cycle towards preservation, if for no other reason than we're talking about 4,000 acres and what percentage the government's going to pay for and what percentage the people who live in the community are going to pay for. So in the next budget cycle, that number can be changed. It's committing to the $500,000, but it's not in perpetuity if future councils or future staffs recommend against it. But Mr. Mayor, it could reflect a helpful credibility for this particular point in the cycle that would maybe make you feel better, because you have been a leading advocate on the 4,000 acres. Particularly where you probably deserve the most credit and may not be getting it is the timing. This thing was on a back shelf for how many years prior to your being the mayor? It was roused up for work by the staff to go get an estimate of what it would cost. We were still talking about up until recently renewing the agreement for another 5 or 9 years. So it seems like things are coming together for reasons that are critically important in terms of the availability of the property. So I wish I could make you think better about the 500,000, not that it's a little bit of money and not that it's being arbitrarily chosen out of the air, maybe in reaction to the money that was siphoned off for water and sewer over the years. But you're the chair. The issue of the 4,000 acres is present among us. You support it. And the dialogue can now go to how much we're going to pay for it and how much the government's going to pay for it in share with the town. When Spur Cross Ranch was done, we actually had to have, and I know you know this, 51% of the property owners to agree to come into the town. And a lot of them didn't want to do it. There was advantages of staying in the county. So then we coaxed them by doing the development agreements, which were good for 25 years of protections on their property. So I think the biggest challenge on this deal, the 4,000 acres, is trying to get people interested in the issue, hopefully supporting the issue, because the timing external to us with the upcoming gubernatorial election, changes in the national politics, and maybe changes because of the Silicon Valley that we become here around Cave Creek, this is probably the last call that we're going to have this opportunity. So the real tough negotiation is going to get the voters to approve this by 50+1 and work out the financial formula by which they think it's fair and something that they would be interested in. So I just try to make you feel better about this. You've led the horse to water and we'd love to drink some. So
I'm never going to feel better about what I view as management malfeasance, which I think this is. I think this managing a number pulled out of the air for optics, give me a break. So that's all I have to say. You're not gonna make me feel better. I don't agree with it. I think I think this council has done better things than this. I hope we do better in the future. But solid financial management, getting the things done. There's not a thing that was done differently. In the past, we've done everything we need to do with open space, every single thing. And this is just optics and virtue signaling, frankly. So no, I'm not going to feel better. I'm voting no. Anybody else want to comment?
So for the ordinance as it was presented to us tonight, the $300,000 would seem to be a somewhat arbitrary number as well. I'm not sure it was based on specific needs of trails or open space as well.
No, it was presented though as $500,000 off the $18 million in perpetuity, specifically for the ASLD land. It was not for open space. It was ASLD. That's how it's presented, and that's fine. That's the basis for my opinion. Okay, anybody else? Let's have a roll call.
Councilmember Arton,
I
Councilmember Driscoll,
Yes,
Councilmember Friedman,
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire,
Yes.
Councilmember Rhodes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Royer,
Yes.
Mayor Morris.
No. All right, we're on to the next item here. Council discussion and possible approval of resolution number 2025-10, approving and adopting revised financial policy number 3, renamed as debt management policy. Sherry.
Thank you, Mayor. So the policy number 3 is establish a debt management policy. This was adopted by council back in January of 2020. The current policy talks about things like debt limits, structure, issuance, and management. We talked in the budget work sessions and work session for the long-range forecast and the utility rate study about the need for debt financing for utility projects. The time to look at the debt management policy and consider any revisions is really before we're at the gate of trying to enter into some of the debt financing, because sometimes when you're there in the midst of it, then you start making policy changes that are based off of what's going on at the moment instead of looking at the big picture. So I would have liked to have done this a little bit sooner, but at least we're not in the midst of looking at issuing debt right now. So with GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, they do have recommendations on policies related to debt, talking about the process of how you evaluate debt, what the practices are for issuing debt, how you manage your debt portfolio, making sure that you're adhering to laws and regulations and federal tax compliance. And there's also post-issuance disclosure, continuing disclosure requirements, and making sure that we're complying with that. GFOA also recommends what some of the goals of a debt management policy should be. One is to make sure that we're improving the quality of our decisions about whether we debt finance or not. Being able to articulate what our policy goals are and providing guidelines for that structure of the debt. And it also demonstrates a commitment to long-term capital needs and financial planning. Excuse me. So it's difficult sometimes to cash fund everything for long-term financial capital needs. And essentially what they're saying is keeping up with those capital needs that create efficiencies in your system, deal with improvements that are necessary because things will deteriorate over time. And sometimes the longer you wait, the more costly it is. So looking at that and trying to make sure that we're maintaining the system well is part of what they recommend as the goals. So first off, I was recommending changing the title. It was establish a debt management policy, and I wanted to change that to just say debt management policy. The objectives within the policy, I have listed here a variety of them for you. One of the objectives would be to make sure that we're minimizing how much our debt service costs are and what the issuance costs are of debt. There's all sorts of costs, just like if you were doing a mortgage on a home. There are costs associated with entering into that debt. Here, we call it issuance costs on the government side. Another thing that's on the list here, I'm not going to go through all of them, is balancing the pay-as-you-go financing approach, the cash funding, as opposed to debt financing. So making sure that we have the right balance there because we do want to cash fund where we can. And also, one of the things on the list is promoting the town's best interest and protecting the town's financial stability when deciding whether or not to issue debt. So whether we use cash or whether we use debt financing, it is a balancing act of we don't want to use so much cash that we can't cover our operating costs. Excuse me. And we don't want to put the town into so much debt that we can't afford the debt service either. So we have to balance it both ways. One of the things in the policy is a prohibition of debt financing current operating and maintenance costs. So we should be able to pay for those costs on a cash basis. Also included is discussion about pay-as-you-go financing. So making sure that we can adequately fund those cash paid projects with current revenues or accumulated balances. So in the budget, we have capital reserves set aside to be able to help pay for some of the projects. Also looking at utilizing cash funding to where we can accomplish projects in an acceptable time frame. If it takes too long to accumulate enough cash to pay for the project that we really should be doing sooner, then we would look at debt financing. But then again, it's also balancing with how much debt do we have? How is it impacting our ability to pay the debt and our credit ratings? And also one of the things that you look at is if market conditions are not suitable for issuing debt, then you would want to consider the cash financing. For the long-term debt financing, so one of the things is making sure that we have the revenues, current and projected revenues, that are sufficient and reliable to be able to pay for the debt service. Anytime that projects are mandated to us, sometimes we have projects that are mandated by the state or the federal government, or maybe even county sometimes. The current revenues and fund balances, if they're not sufficient to pay for those mandated projects, then debt financing would be something that we would look to. If a project needs immediate need to meet or relieve any sort of capacity needs, then looking at debt financing would be an option to cover that. We do have that the life of the project or the asset should be at least 5 years or more. When we're issuing things like bonds or super long-term debt, we're looking at longer than 5 years. 5 years would be a minimum for things like leases, lease purchases of equipment. Some of the things in the policy related to permitted debt. So looking to structure the debt so that we have the lowest possible net interest cost, but also not compromising future flexibility to fund the project. So again, trying to make that balance of how much should the debt amounts, the payments, annual payments be, and how long should the term of the debt be compared to our ability to manage our cash and future debt needs. Listed in the policy are some of the different types of debt. The first is general obligation bonds. This is what Councilor Ogden was referring to earlier, that general obligation bonds are when we go to the voters and ask the voters to approve the issuance of debt for a particular project or purchase, and then it becomes repaid with property tax. General obligation bonds are the option that we would typically get the lowest interest rate in doing those, but then that becomes the revenue source is property tax and not sales tax. Excise tax obligations, on the other hand, are basically all the unrestricted revenues. So the largest is going to be the sales tax, but there's also state shared income tax and state shared sales tax, franchise fees, licenses, permits. Any of those revenues would go towards being pledged to repay the excise tax obligations. The limit on that is based off of a times coverage ratio. So commonly it's like 1.5 times. The revenues have to be 1.5 times what the debt service is. Sometimes it's 2 times. It depends upon what the debt covenants say. Revenue bonds would be based off of specific revenue streams. So for instance, if it was something where we only wanted to use water revenue or wastewater revenue, that would be something that would fall under the revenue bonds. Because of the restriction on the revenue source, those tend to be the ones at the highest cost on the interest rates. As I said, the GO bonds would be the lowest. Excise tax bonds, because there's a lot more revenue stream there to cover it. Typically, it would be a better interest rate than revenue bonds. Also, the excise tax obligations do have within the debt covenants that we're pledging our ability to tax. So if we came in under the required times coverage, then there would be things such as having a debt service reserve set aside for repayment, or potentially even looking at increasing tax TPT rates in order to cover the difference. Special assessment bonds would be related to any sort of special district that the town could potentially set up, related to things that are in a particular area, particular neighborhood. If there's paving of streets, extension of sewer or water lines, then only those in that area that are impacted by those improvements and get the benefit of those improvements would pay the assessments that would repay the bonds.
How would those assessments, how would that money be secured from the property owners if something like that happened? What's the typical way to do that?
So if there was an issue, there's always the opportunity to do a lien on the property.
Okay, you have a bond, you have a certain payment every year for that bond.
Mhm.
Where does the money come from to pay the carrying costs for that bond payment?
From the assessments to those properties.
So you'd assess the property and they would give you a
Yes.
lump sum for it?
No, an annual amount.
An annual amount? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
You could do it monthly amount too, correct?
Yeah, usually the assessor's office would handle that. So, I'd have to look into if we could do a monthly amount.
My understanding, it's usually done through the assessor's office, unless it's like an improvement district. And even then, that's typically through the assessor's office.
Yeah, that was our experience when we did the Highland Road Improvement District back in the 90s, probably middle 90s, late 90s. But it was handled by the county assessor who collected those fees for the period of time to pay for the road improvement.
Another type of debt financing vehicle would be lease purchases. The policy states that vehicles, equipment, capital assets with a life of less than 10 years could qualify under a lease purchase. And the principal and interest amounts would be paid out of the operating budget or any dedicated resources that were attributed to that. Typically, you don't dedicate resources to a lease purchase, but if for some reason we did, could do that. Low interest loans are another debt financing vehicle. So this would be something like a WIFA loan where they have federal and state funding that helps bring those interest rates down. So we do have in the policy that we would use this whenever practical. There can be times when the regulations of the feds and or state, typically it's the feds, creates additional costs to the project that sometimes it's not cost beneficial unless we're saving enough on the interest to go that route. Also within the policy, it talks about credit enhancements. So letters of credit or bond insurance. So these would be things to help bring down what the rate is that we would repay. So in a past experience where I have previously worked, we attempted to ask the rating agency to give us a higher rating because we had done very well financially. Well, they hesitated and said, no, we're not really quite ready to do that. Well, the insurance, the bond insurance that we received, the municipal advisor said he'd never seen the insurance so cheap as that because it basically testified to the rating agency really should have given us the higher rating. The policy prohibits variable rate debt. And it does establish that the debt limits would comply with the Constitution and debt covenants, but also that we would not exceed the town's ability to repay. So I have listed here what the state limits are for, and these are specific to the general obligation bonds. Is based off a percentage of what the net assessed valuation of taxable property is within the town. And so there's different limits there based off of the different types of things that could potentially be used. So for instance, we've been talking about open space that falls in the 20% category. So we could issue up to 20% of what the net assessed value would be. The debt covenants, so those would typically have that times coverage that we talked about earlier, whether it's 1.5 times what the debt payment is or 2 times. The policy also discusses the service providers. And so in the policy, the finance director would solicit and select the bond counsel, municipal advisor, and the underwriters. When it comes to actually bringing forward to council to issue the debt, then that becomes part of what council is approving. The bond counsel, bond counsel is very important to the process of issuing debt. They help make sure that we meet all the statutory and constitutional requirements and any of the federal requirements, and just anything legal as relates to it. They definitely do a lot of checking and asking questions to understand the project to make sure that it qualifies to be tax exempt debt. If we could issue taxable debt if we wanted to, but that comes with a higher price tag on the interest rate that we would pay when we repay the amount. For municipal advisor, and you will hear us lots of times refer to the municipal advisor as a financial advisor. It was a category, a subcategory of financial advisors that the SEC created in 2014, specific to governmental entities. The municipal advisors have a fiduciary responsibility in their role with the town. They monitor the market and help structure and develop the pricing of the debt. They write the official statement of disclosure. And there are professional and testing standards that they must follow. The MSRB, the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, does have a rule that any broker dealer firm that is providing financial advisory services, they cannot serve as both the municipal advisor and the underwriter on the same transaction. So that is included in the policy. The underwriter is essentially the entity, the company that will handle the purchase of the negotiated debt and reselling it to investors. Another one of the rules under MSRB is that the municipal advisor and the underwriter cannot provide services to the town for at least 2 years after they've made a political contribution to any of the elected officials. So hopefully they mind that. The policy also talks about the ways of selling bonds, the methods of sale. So sometimes it's a competitive sale, sometimes it's negotiated, and sometimes it's a direct placement. And the municipal advisor is the one who helps coordinate all that and determine what will be the most advantageous for the town. There are disclosure rules that are covered in the policy. SEC requires certain things to be posted as far as continuing disclosure. We would have to make sure that the official offering statement is posted on EMMA, the Electronic Municipal Market Access. They also want to see audited financial statements annually. And typically, if it's excise tax bonds, they want to see what that times coverage calculation is. For credit ratings in the policy, so if it was debt that required a rating, so we do not have maintain a credit rating at this point in time because our debt is WIFA loans and direct placements. So if it was something that's going out on the market, then we do need to have a credit rating. And so the policy covers that. Policy also covers how we would invest our bond proceeds, making sure that we comply with all the federal, state, and the indenture restrictions. There's such a thing as what they call federal arbitrage and rebate compliance. I don't know if anybody has heard about that. Essentially what that is we are not allowed to issue debt and make a profit off the proceeds when we turn around and then repay. So if we are earning a higher interest on the proceeds before we spend it and pay a lower amount on the interest when we make the payments, then IRS wants that money. And it's essentially 100% tax. IRS rules and it's very complicated and there's lots of exceptions to exceptions to exceptions. So I'll just leave it at that very basic part. As far as the issuance and post-issuance compliance, so it is required until the debt is no longer outstanding. So if it's a 20-year debt, 30-year debt, the compliance must continue throughout that time. Defeasance, prepayment, refunding. So think of this as whether you're paying off your mortgage, you're refinancing your mortgage on your home. Essentially, that's what this is referring to. So the municipal advisor would assist with doing annual reviews of our outstanding debt. And if it is an interest rate environment that is conducive to doing a refunding, which is essentially like a refinancing, then we would proceed with that. The common standard that is used is the present value savings would need to exceed 3% of the refunded principal. So as I mentioned before, there are issuance costs. You want to make sure the issuance costs are covered and you want to make sure it's worth all the time and effort. Reporting is covered under the policy. So one of the things that we have included in here is quarterly reporting. It will not be in the quarterly report for later this evening, but we will include that in the next one. Been very busy. I contemplated, but I just didn't have time for this particular quarterly report. But we will start including summary of what the outstanding debt is. And if we have GO bonds, the calculation of what the debt capacity is. There's also an annual requirement that the state requires that we report to them what our outstanding indebtedness is, and then they consolidate all the entities across the state to show what the total indebtedness is of all the governmental entities. And then, of course, the information that goes in the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR. So the revision of this policy is one of the things that is in the strategic plan to update the financial policies. The time frame was fiscal year 2026 and then annually. I believe this is the last of the council adopted policies to be revised. We will be looking at if there are additional policies that we feel would need to be council adopted currently, and we'll be talking about a little bit later. We are looking at some of the administrative policies right now. So any questions?
Questions? Seeing none, public comment?
I have no one wishing to speak.
Okay, we're looking for a motion.
I'd be happy to make one.
Okay.
I move approval of resolution number 2025-10, approving and adopting revised financial policy number 3, renamed as debt management policy.
Second.
Discussion? Cynthia? you had
I think the
motion?
presentation was very thorough and very detailed, easy to follow and understand what the objectives are and the improvements to the town processes. So thank you for that work.
Dusty?
No, I think it's a good job.
Thank you.
Other comments? I just want to say that this is really well written. When I read it, I was
Mhm.
very, very pleased with the organization and thoroughness of it. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's have a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're on to council discussion, possible approval of an intergovernmental agreement extension between the town of Cave Creek and Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, the item before you is an extension of the current intergovernmental agreement between the town and Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We've had a intergovernmental agreement with the Sheriff's Office for a number of years, and we're getting close to wrapping up the IGA, but we just don't believe it'll be done in time for the June 16th meeting. The request is to extend the agreement through September 30th, in which time we'll be able to come back in September with a finalized agreement for the council. The current costs are established per the IGA that we have now with the county. And in February of every year, they tell us what it's going to cost for the next year. And as you recall, going through the budget process, we had a modest dip or reduction in what we're paying for next fiscal year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that mayor and council may have at this time.
Questions?
Why was there the dip that took place?
The cost reductions primarily because of the county's efforts to pay down the public safety retirement system, unfunded liability. So I believe the county paid $550 million, which then reduced what would be considered their normal rate of contribution for the sheriff's office. So they are just extending the savings back onto the contract cities and towns.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment.
There is none.
There is none. Okay, looking for a motion then.
I move to approve an extension of the current intergovernmental agreement with Maricopa County Sheriff for a period of 90 days.
Second.
Comment?
Not like we have a choice on this. Let's go ahead and do it.
Things are better in September.
Okay, all those, any other comments before all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 7-0. We are on to number 5, which is council discussion possible approval of a cooperative purchasing agreement with Goodman's LLC for the furniture in the new town office area of the Foothills Food Bank building for an amount not to exceed $137,794 and authorize the town manager and staff to execute the necessary documents.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here with Hal, Marin. So we're actually going to present this because we've been both working on the project and we actually both have staff that are going to benefit from this building. So we're both excited to be coming to this conclusion of this project. As part of our lease agreement with the food bank, Foothills Food Bank, we're actually getting a 3,200 square foot office space. That is actually the east side of the building. I sort of circled on the map you see there. It's going to house water distribution, public works, and wastewater treatment staff. So currently that's 16 staff members who currently reside in the double wide trailer at the Water Ranch and have to make that space work. So this is more than double the space. It's going to give them a lot better working conditions overall. But overall, it's a good project. It's a good synergy project that we did with the food bank where they built out the building, did all the site improvements, and we just have to do the tenant improvements inside of it. So for cost effectiveness, it's actually a great way for the town to get this space built. So as I said, we're responsible for the inside. They built the building, the exterior walls, the floor slab, the roof. So we have to do the tenant improvements. So as you can see, this is a photo taken just last week. We're putting up the sheetrock right now. So we've got the space is getting built out. We've got the electricians working. We've got our networking going in. And we're going to get the rest of the work done. We're trying to move in August at this point by doing this award with Goodman's. It's actually next year's funding, but because we were told that the budget's being approved and the expenditure won't occur until after the July budget, we can get them working. They're looking at a 4 to 6 week or 5 to 6 weeks delivery. So that could get us in as early as the end of July, but more realistically in August, we'll move staff into this space. So we worked with Goodman's close to the beginning of the project. They have an existing state contracts. We were able to reach out to them and start working with the architect to actually better design the space. So what you're seeing here is a representation of the space, the Goodman's furniture overlaid over what's being constructed out there. We're getting 5 hard wall offices, 3 workstations for our wastewater staff. The supervisor gets an office, a wastewater control room desk, 12 workstations for the field staff, in a common area that you exit into or enter into off the double doors. Desks and chairs for conference break rooms, and actually they're providing the lockers for the restrooms. We actually have 2 separate locker rooms in the facility. So we're getting a fair amount of equipment. And this is a rendering of actually the different offices. So starting at the top, that's a typical office, the wastewater workstations. There's that cubicle station as we come around clockwise. For the field distribution and the public works staff, and then we have the conference training room. This is showing it as laid out as a conference room where we have video projection on one side, but you can actually arrange it multiple ways. Those are movable tables. So it gives people a lunchroom, which they currently don't have, or a training space, or even just a meeting room for us. So it's a great improvement for us overall. So I know before we've talked about this project and it keeps coming back, we want to present the entire overall cost for the town for this. So we estimated about $1 million for the space. It works out to about $300 per square foot, which when we looked around at other projects is actually about a third of what other municipalities are paying for the building if they had to build it from the shell up, not just getting a gray space like we are here. So their largest expenditure is with Muir Contracting, $562,000. They're working away very diligently with their subcontractors, getting the space cleared out. The second largest cost was going to be the furniture, and we sort of knew that going in. The budget estimate column you'll see on this was actually almost 18 months old. So some of the costs that you're seeing here, because the budget furniture's cost has gone up, we detailed the space out. We have extra whiteboards and some other stuff, but part of it is just cost per their standard contract with Maricopa or with the state. They're allowed to do annual increases. So, but overall, we've got a real great site. The next most expensive cost on the project is actually to extend power and networking from the Water Ranch building. So we actually had about a 900-foot gap that we had to actually get a duct bank constructed that does connect this building space to our Water Ranch. We're actually going to be powered from the Water Ranch, which actually has emergency generator backup. The Water Ranch facility site was actually originally laid out for 2 building spaces, this being one of them. So we're actually able to pull that circuit down here. We're actually do a fiber optic link too. So there's the operator sitting in the control room. It won't be any difference than them being either in the trailer or actually working at the PLCs. So it's a great improvement for us overall. And then we have a lot of smaller miscellaneous costs that add up to complete the space out. We have our architect's cost. We have other miscellaneous things like just buying phones, and we've been working with smaller vendors to do things like the building alarm system, adding security cameras, card access, and things like network cabling. So overall, we looked at the budget a few years ago and put money in our capital program, about $1 million. So we're just under that $955,000 is what we expect it'll cost us to complete the space. So what we're asking for council's approval tonight is to approve the cooperative purchase agreement with Goodman's. So Goodman's has an existing state contract that allow us to place the order so they can deliver, we believe in July, the furniture for the space and install it. It's only going to take 2 days for them to install it, they think. But it's for the contract amount of $137,794. And with that, we can answer any questions you might have about the space or the project overall.
On the floor plan, it has the unisex bathroom, which appears to have lockers in it, and that would be for female staff.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember. So currently we don't have any female staff, so we set that aside. So we set that each of the restrooms actually has a shower. So there's a restroom, shower, and a sink. So we set that up. So if we ever do have female staff, they actually have a restroom, a private restroom space.
And currently, how many employees will occupy this space with this amount of furniture?
16.
And there's room for growth?
Yeah, there's actually at least 2 of the offices aren't assigned right now. So in the budget process, we actually talked about a civil engineer project manager. They might reside down in this space, and then we'd actually have a flex office. So right now we have some room to grow.
Thank you.
What's the impact going to be on the enlargement of the town hall? Is there?
I would say not really, because these are actually the existing staff that are currently crammed into a single double wide down at the Water Ranch being relocated to this space. So
Okay.
yeah,
They share it with about 100,000 termites.
a little less.
Keep the termites happy. Them and the ants, they're taking over the world.
No,
I've
it's a
not
good
said
question, and I was excited when I first started here about this project, and I think it's still a great project. I was just hoping it had more square footage, like you.
Yeah, we did have some.
So I went out to the Water Ranch, and I saw the facility out there that they're currently working in. It is a Roach Palace. But the new facility, which I got a tour from Sean at the last open house, it's pretty good. I mean, it's got everything. It's state of the art, and it's going to be very helpful for this town. And also it's going to help to keep staff, which is key.
I was also there for the pre-grand opening for the Foothills Food Bank, which was a wonderful event. And I saw the new space as well. And I can only say it was so well deserved. To even think that our people were working in such conditions is really hard to imagine that we let that happen. So congratulations to you both on this magnificent improvement for the water guys.
Other comments? Okay, public comment.
I have none.
I have none. Okay, we're looking for a motion then.
I'll make
Okay.
it.
Go ahead.
I move approval of a cooperative purchasing agreement with Goodman's LLC for the furniture in the new town office area in the Foothills Food Bank building for an amount not to exceed $137,794 and authorize the town manager and staff to execute the necessary documents.
Second.
Okay, you had the motion?
No, I think we're at the finish line, getting there. And this is the last piece to fall into place. It's good to see the overall budget come in under the budgeted amount. So that looks favorable. Thank you.
I agree.
I'm just glad you're not going down to Costco and getting folding tables and chairs. So this is a big improvement.
We thought about it, but we can't.
Or go to the Holland Center.
Right.
Other.
That worked.
No.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're on to the third quarter finance report.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council. I have with me here our accounting manager, Bridget Black. And so she is going to cover a portion of the report. And so we're going to go through what projects that we've completed, that are in process, and future projects that we have not yet started. As we've talked about in prior quarterly reports, we have an awful lot of projects on our plate and not really seeing a light at the end of the tunnel yet, but we're getting a lot accomplished. We'll be going through.
Before you start sharing, how many people are in your department?
So it's a total of 5.
A total of 5.
Yes.
What are the positions?
Myself as the director, Bridget is the accounting manager. We have an accountant position, and we have a lead utility billing specialist and a utility billing specialist.
Okay, so it covers all the water bills. Your people do the water bills.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. We're a very small staff. We'll also talk about the financial status for the third quarter, the investment report for the third quarter, and looking at performance measures. So I'm going to turn it over to Bridget to talk about projects that we have been working on. That's just for advancing the slides.
Hi, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. So I'm talking about the projects completed. Long-range forecasts. We presented that on 4/3. Fiscal year 2026 proposed budget, including many changes. OpenGov supplementals, CIP project sheets. W-2s now available electronically, and a Leadership Supervisor Academy that I attended. And on the next page, in process projects. So we're not going to cover all of them, but we're going to cover most of them. And they fit in the strategic plan, mostly in the fiscal sustainability. So banking services, including integration with SmartGov. Accounting position that we filled on 5/12. Our fund balance policy, which was approved on 5/5. Utilize other OpenGov features, evaluate other software options. RFP for audit services issued on 4/29. And final ARPA reporting completed on 4/24.
So some of these go beyond the third quarter.
And debt lease software subscription liability tracking software. We're working on administrative financial policies, credit card acceptance, safe usage, cash receipting, AP electronic payments. And some of our future projects are evaluate the permanent base adjustment option, and evaluate options for fuel card and discount programs.
Could I just ask a question? What does DMO stand for? Sorry, I don't know.
Designated or destination marketing organization. So that's something that the Arizona Office of Tourism establishes that formalizes who our tourism bureau is.
By becoming a DMO, it will open the door for additional grant money for us to help offset our costs that we do for marketing, promoting the community.
Some of our other future projects will be utilize other Cassell features, which is our accounting software program, to evaluate other software options. And any questions?
Sounds like you've been pretty busy.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a lot of plates spinning. So one of the things that Bridget talked about was some of the things that we've done with OpenGov with our budget software. We are looking at other options for budget software because there's very little of what we've done in the budget that actually comes out of the software. There's a lot of workarounds that we're doing, and it's been rather painful. And also on the accounting software that we use, Cassell. So that's on the list. It's not necessarily something that's on the top end of the priority, but in trying to work with Wells Fargo in the implementation of our banking services. I have let Grady know that I feel like the utility billing module is something that we should be looking at probably sooner rather than later because of the complications we're dealing with there.
Are these software programs integrated?
OpenGov does have a nightly update with Cassell.
And what was the other one? The utility billing, is that?
It's a module within Cassell.
Okay.
Have you ever considered outsourcing the billing for the utility?
We haven't really looked into that too much. I think with the banking services that we're wanting to implement, it will automate things quite a lot. And so that is part of when we looked at the reorganization of the department to be able to take on some of the additional duties. The banking services and the things that would be provided was something that was really key to be able to take on those duties. So they will, once we have it set up with the utility billing side, the link with Wells Fargo, they will do a campaign to the utility customers, trying to encourage people to pay electronically, sign up for an account, set up for automatic pay, even if they don't want to do automatic pay, to be able to pay electronically because that saves us a lot of time. The amount of time that goes into entering paper checks into utility billing module is pretty significant. Even to the point that the post office doesn't deliver those checks to us. We have to go to the post office to go pick them up. And when someone is thinking that they're paying electronically, and they go to their own bank's online bill pay system, what Wells Fargo is going to get us set up on is it would be converted to basically an electronic check to automatically go into our account. We don't have that right now with our current banking services. Basically, when that bank cuts a check, they're writing a paper check that then gets mailed to us. And then there's all sorts of variety of issues when people are using their own bank's online bill pay. They don't get their account numbers right. They don't even put an account number at all. Like there's just a whole lot of human intervention that has to happen. Yeah. So there's a lot to be done, a lot there. We're working on it.
Sherry, also on the utility billing system, the other downside is as we're starting to get into conservation, we're very limited just to like messages, but not doing more robust conservation things that we can help educate and help get people convinced to do some water conservation. It's just, what is it, like just a single line of like a message that we can do on the bill. It's not really robust.
Yeah, no, it's got a, I don't remember off the top of my head what the character limit is, but it's pretty limited.
Yeah, please conserve.
Okay. So if we're ready to move on to the financial status of the third quarter. So first up, I have here the TPT revenues by fund, and this is cash basis. So it's June. May's TPT taxes, the taxpayers have until the end of June to make those payments. Sometimes people will pay those early, but by the time that the Arizona Department of Revenue processes all those submissions, then it's like partway into July before we actually know what May revenues are. So this is cash basis based off of the weekly distributions that they do based off of what forms they process so far. So it includes about 90%. So the third quarter so end of March includes about 90% of what the February taxes were, but none of the March taxes. So going on, February is about 8 months of the year. That's 67%. And so we, for the third quarter, are at 73% of the budget in total. And that's even considering that the residential rental tax ended December 31st. The comparison with the third quarter of, that should say 24. Sorry for the typo. The comparison to the previous quarter. So we're 18% ahead of that. When you look at based off of the change based off of fund, it's not really very comparable right now because we did some corrections to the way the TPT taxes are allocated. So there were issues that we had found that the half cent for the utilities and the half cent for Spur Cross were not being allocated appropriately. The construction portion of the tax was supposed to be allocated and it wasn't, and the bed tax was not supposed to be allocated and it was. So there's a lot of corrections and stuff. So the comparison between the years doesn't really work very well. But looking at the bottom line does. This particular look at this is based off of an accrual basis, but I would say like a quasi accrual basis. So when the state is going to close for the month of May, sometime in early to mid-July, it is based off of what got processed in that GL period since the closing of April. So you could have somebody who was delinquent and did not pay their April taxes. So May could include some delinquencies of previous periods. And there could be people who didn't get their May taxes paid on time and they will show up in the June period. So there's not a good way of getting actual information of exactly based off of the months, because when you look at the detail of what's being paid, I mean, there are some of these things that go back like a decade or two where they're going back and readjusting and saying, I needed to correct this form because of this, that, or whatever. The other thing too that I always like to remind is it's only as good as the information provided. And from what I've seen in some of the delving into numbers that I've done, people make a lot of mistakes on their forms, and it's trying to weed through all of that information. So this is as best as we have for what the revenues are as of the third quarter on an accrual basis. So the comparison of for the current fiscal year through quarter three compared to the previous year, we're 13% ahead. If you look at the numbers without construction, because you can see construction is significantly higher than the previous year for the first three quarters, 95% ahead. The other categories, they all average out to it's 2% in total if you don't include the construction. So that 13% is heavily construction increases.
Why we've been expecting construction to drop, and this is out of the ballpark. So can you add any color to that?
I can't really provide any specifics on anything, but there has been activity going on. Yes, and if Luke was here, but he's not He's in
Yeah.
Spain. So, so there are things that have been happening on the development side. And even when I had spoken with him, when I was working on my estimates for the budget, and he was saying that the last part of the year, he expected it to drop off. But yes, it was really strong during the first half of fiscal year 25, but it's still been pretty strong here on the construction side. So I'm sure it'll drop off at some point, but we're just not at that drop off yet. I added a slide to look at some of the seasonality in what the revenues are. So this is what we have so far for fiscal year 25, going back through fiscal year 22. So you can see that July and August, it's a little bit lower. We start edging up until we hit December, then we drop off January, February, go back up March, April, and then start slowing back down in the summertime. So I would say that's pretty typical of what you would see in an Arizona community that receives some tourism, snowbirds, things like that, that have some impact on this. One of the things that I did want to point out, so for fiscal year 24, the green bars, the peak was March in fiscal year 24. So far, for fiscal year 25, the peak has been December, and it was quite a bit of a jump there in December compared to previous years. The fiscal year 22, the orange bars, for March and April, you see April goes up a little bit compared to March. Fiscal year 23, the blue bars, fairly more significant jump. And my guess is that maybe there was some delinquencies from March that were included in April. Then you see the green bars had quite a drop between March and April. So there was that 1 year of the data that I've pulled, but the other years it was an increase. So I'm very curious when we get April data to find out where are we at? Did we go up compared to March, or did we have a drop? I don't know how much Bike Week would have an impact on that. So maybe we'll see April be up.
Is there more on the bottom of this slide? Or we only,
Yeah.
it looks like we're not seeing the whole slide here.
What's
On-
on
on-
the
on
screen
our
there,
screen.
that's the whole slide.
Screen, it stops right below the dates. We can't see all of FY 25.
Yeah, it doesn't give you the bar color.
Or the, what do you call it?
The legend.
The legend, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you don't see this part here with the legend?
Yeah, nothing below January, February, March. That's
Oh, so you can see that on the
Okay.
screen.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know how
what-
but
your
not on the
screens work,
screen.
but.
delegate that to Captain Kirk.
So you might not be able to see the dates that I had for fiscal
Right.
year 25. So the rodeo parade was March 22nd, rodeo March 26th through 29th, and then Bike Week started in March 28th and went through April 6th.
You know, what's happening is the two
picture
screens
on
at
the
the
bottom.
top are artificially pushing down on the exhibit.
Oh,
Shared screen.
Okay.
So it's not.
Did you hear that, Brian?
We'll go ahead and continue while we're.
Okay. So looking at all the revenues, so we've been talking about the TPT, the sales tax revenues. So the comparison here, the third quarter revenues are at 59% of what the budgeted revenues were for the year, and 3% over what third quarter as of last year was. There are some placeholders that are involved and grant funding that has why the 59% of the budget so far. In the special revenue funds, that's where the grants and other restricted funds are, that has a placeholder on both the expenditure and the revenue side for unknown grants of $3 million. So that has a huge impact on that. And with Cave Creek Water, there's 2.2 million of grant funding that's not yet received that was budgeted. Looking at expenditures, so looking at based off of category, operating versus capital. So with the third quarter on the expenditure side, we are at 49% of budget. Operating is at 53% and capital is at 45%. Compared to third quarter of last year, we're 13% ahead of where we were at in fiscal year 24. Capital is 276%, and there's an awful lot of things that have been happening in capital with the Phoenix Interconnect. There's the water meter replacements, the fire station construction, fire vehicles, road projects, the skybox, a lot that's been going on this year. Looking at those expenditures by fund. So again, it's the same numbers on our totals here, 49% of budget and 58% of last year, but looking at it by fund. So general fund, so this is all cash basis. And so one of the things is just a timing difference in our quarterly payments to Daisy Mountain. That was 694. And the general fund is where the expenditures were for the fire station. So there were some costs for the fire station last year, but we're almost $1 million ahead of where we were at on how much we've spent. We have fire vehicles as well of 1.2 million. Road projects ahead of where we were at last year, 630,000. Skybox compared to other projects at the rodeo ground. So that's 233,000 more than what had gone on. The water, Cave Creek Water Fund compared to last year, it's another really big one there. So 6.1 million on the capital expenditures for the Phoenix Interconnect, and the water meter replacements, 223,000 are some of those large items. Looking at a summary of the fund balances. So the beginning balances for the year, so the previous fiscal year's been audited. That number is 38.5 million in total on our beginning balances. The revenues at 22 million, expenditures at 28. The other financing sources, so there's some transfers between funds, but that net amount of 2 million is how much we've received on a cash basis on our drawdowns from our WIFA loan. And so we're at 35 million on a cash basis on our fund balance as of March. Just to highlight a few of the CIP projects. So the Phoenix Interconnect. So it was budgeted really for the full project in fiscal year 25 at 13.7. And so far, third quarter, we're at 6.6. This project will carry over into the next fiscal year. The fire station. So project total to date, 5 million. The amount spent in through the third quarter in fiscal year 25 is 2 million. The station itself is complete. Emergency lighting and fencing has been installed. The gate, so the note that I had here, it was supposed to have been done last week is what they had told Mr. Ford, but they had some issues, but they are for sure going to have it done before June 30 for the remainder of the gate and the intersection safety striping. We had the fire engine and the fire tender truck this year, the skybox for the rodeo grounds, road projects. Where we're at as of the third quarter is 1.1 million. And then we had budgeted the placeholder for the open space that is not expected to be spent this year, and that will carry over to the next year. On the investments, so here's a summary of the investments held as of March 31, 2025, about 35.9 million. For the portfolio, the rate of return is 4.08 compared to what our benchmark is, the 3-year treasury, 3.89, so ahead of that. And I do have that comparison on the yields that we had talked about last time, that with our investment with the state treasurer's office and the local government investment pool, because of the diversity of what they hold, when the market goes down, they track and go down, but not as quickly as what the downturn does in the market. And then when the market starts coming back up, it takes a little bit, but you can see here, it's not quite as dramatic as what the gap was before. But we are, for March, back over what the 3-year treasury is. And a portion of that is also due to reducing how much that we were maintaining in the checking account. We have since started shifting money over to the Wells Fargo account, which that has the sweep. And so we will earn rates very comparable to the LGIP through the sweep as well. As far as the net transactions for the month, so on the checking accounts, very slight change. And the gain on our LGIP, local government investment pool with state treasurer, 345,000. So we went up for the quarter. And then here's a summary of our performance measures. So kudos to Bridget here. She works very hard and gets the GL closed very quickly. The measure is to get it closed within 10 business days after the end of the month. And as you can see here, she's got within 3 business days, 2 business days, 3 business days for the months of the quarter. The award from GFOA for our annual comprehensive financial report, our ACFR, that's an annual measure. We have not heard back on that yet. We did hear from GFOA about the award on our budget for fiscal year 25. And so we did receive the award. One of the things to note is they did have a conditional requirement on that because we weren't doing a whole lot with performance measures previously. And so they are asking that we beef up that section, which we feel like that we have expanded on it. And as we have more years of tracking performance measures, then I think we will better qualify for what they're looking for. But I think they will give us a little bit of grace. The percentage of AP invoices paid within 30 days. So you could see that we had a couple months there that were less than 100%. And we're still working on getting vendors to send their invoices directly to finance so that we have the ability to track them. So things keep slipping through where they go directly to a department, and sometimes it ends up on somebody's desk for a while before they realize, oh, I got to get this invoice turned in, and we don't even know it's there or exists. So we are working on that. The percentage of utility accounts that are over 60 days on the receivables, 5% is very low rate. So that's very good. And then we already talked about the investment return compared to the treasury rate. Are there any questions?
I see none.
Right?
I guess there's we don't have a public comment on this, and there's no public here to comment, so.
I guess my question would only be to you, Sherry. How do you envision improving upon what you're already doing? I mean, what are your major challenges? And is there anything that we could do to support your efforts? So one of the things was that the accountant position had been vacant most of the time for nearly a year. So we had hired someone at one point. It just wasn't the right fit. We just got somebody hired May 12th, I believe the date was. And so we're very excited, very happy about the person that we have now. She's great. Her name's Dorothy Williams. And she comes with a lot of skills and a hard worker. And so we're very thrilled to have her. So I think that will be a big benefit because Bridget has been trying to basically do 2 jobs and try and help me. And I'm trying to like redo and change everything that I touch. So yeah. So yes, we've been working a ton of hours. Yeah. I usually kick Bridget out and send her home, but well, we appreciate it and look forward to days that aren't quite as long for you all. Thank you.
Are you going to be able to get all of the software talking to each other and moving this year, or do you need some additional stuff?
So we for sure want to address the budget software. That was really a very heavy lift, and you don't even want to know how many hours were put in.
But we didn't, when did we buy that budget software? That was pretty recent,
It
wasn't
was
it?
about 18 months ago, maybe.
Mhm. Did we
2023.
get a refund from them?
Yeah,
Do we get any-
2023.
Have we
Well,
complained at all?
the way it works is it's really a subscription.
Mm.
So, Sherry and the staff have a proposal to go with really the system that we should have gone with. So most of the Valley cities are using the one that she's going to be recommending. And we had it where I came from before, and I was excited when I came here because, you know, the plan names, it was, we're going to be recommending a ClearGov. When I got here, it's like OpenGov. I'm like, oh, that's the one I'm familiar with. This is good. And then wasn't quite, but you know, I thought, okay, have an open mind, and it was a dog from the time we started working with it. So, and unfortunately, they chose to try to do implementation during the time that you start your budget process. You normally do things during the off season, you know, like during the summertime. So that's the goal here. And there's a number of other things. You'll be seeing Sherry coming forward with other recommendations for like a utility billing system that might be that can be integrated and interface with our general ledger system, Cassell. They've tried to do what they can with the utility billing system, and it has limitations.
Have we considered not providing an option for people to pay by check? It's almost like when I was working, they wouldn't do checks only by direct deposit. And obviously the government does it that way as well.
It's getting harder for people to write checks. I think all the features that we have with our banking system, as Sherry's mentioned, that we've just switched over to Wells Fargo, they offer a lot of different things that will help us in the long run to try to automate and try to reduce the people writing checks. Kind of reminds me of when you go to Walmart years ago. Walmart was on the cutting edge, and you'd write a check and then they would scan and give you a check back. It's kind of the same thing. What I heard earlier from what Sherry was talking about is there's all sorts of different technologies and other things that they're going to be utilizing to help us with that. So I don't think you can ever really get away from it. I've never seen with a municipality ever getting away from necessarily all like checks or even cash even. We'll do everything we can to discourage it, but there's always going to be people that have other forms of payment, and you have to just be willing to accept it.
And currently, the system that we have set up discourages people from paying electronically anyway, because it's set up to charge them an additional fee.
Oh,
So is that going to go away? That fee?
Yes. So when we move
Yeah.
away from PSN, then that will go away. We are implementing Wells Fargo without charging the customers a fee, because to pay the fees compared to the amount of staff time, it's just not worth it. So
yeah.
I know some businesses, they charge an additional fee if you use a credit card. And in some cases, it doesn't gain them anything if you pay electronically over check, but for us, it does. So that is for sure one of the things. But also back to Councilor Rhodes' question. So we are looking at some of the other things too as well. So within Grady Signature Authority, we're, as Bridget had mentioned, getting a system that would be for tracking our debt, and it will automate things for us to where it'll even do all of our journal entries related to debt for us.
Procurement
What was the
cards
thing?
will be another.
The procurement cards with the banking services. So we're working on that. So that will automate things for us as well. What was the other software? No, I covered the debt book. What's the other software? I'm drawing a blank.
That's
What
okay.
the other software was. But we're looking, and then one of the other things too. So Bridget had mentioned that we had issued an RFP for audit services. And so we are expecting to bring to council at the next meeting the award for a new audit firm. And we think that will also provide some efficiencies and some benefits for us because of the work that they can do for us and take off our plate.
Which includes also the special audit that the council's
Yes.
authorized us to proceed with.
Anyone else? Well, that concludes our business, and by state law, we can't talk about anything else, so meeting adjourned.
Thank you.